This is Fight Night, a new podcast from iHeartRadio.
They thought he had robbed the deadliest men in this country. Guys who would not hesitate to blow your head off.
This story from Atlanta, Georgia, has been reported for 50 years. But now, for the first time, you're going to hear what really happened from the people who lived it. Listen and follow Fight Night on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
After you listen to today's podcast, here's one to add to your playlist. I'm Christian O'Connell, and I've had this thought for a while. What if you took the world's funniest and most interesting people...
Hello, I'm Ricky Gervais.
Celeste Barber. Some people call me Beyonce.
I'm Russell Brand.
...and asked them to share the stories behind their 3 most treasured items.
No doubt about it, the guitar. I think I know the same chords now as I did when I was 14.
From iHeartRadio, this is The Stuff of Legends. Add it to your playlist for free. Just search for Stuff of Legends in your podcast app.
For the week of Thursday, July 2nd, the calendar has officially rolled over into the second half of 2020 and into our 5th month of coronavirus lockdowns. And that's not all we have to be concerned about. While the political left expresses concerns about possible election tampering in November, the conservative right is casting doubts about the integrity of mail-in voting. And just to make sure that none of us can really sleep at night, Russia rears its head into our national dialogue once again. I'm Clay Aiken for Politicon, and I wonder, is it really plausible that the president didn't know about bounties placed on the heads of U.S. troops by Russia? What's more important, election integrity or voting access? And are they mutually exclusive? Ida Rodriguez is a comedian, actress, author, and mother, currently starring in Tiffany Haddish's Netflix comedy, They Ready? John Orloff is an acclaimed screenwriter whose writing for HBO's series Band of Brothers earned him an Emmy nomination, and who recently turned his talents to political ad making. And Sonny Johnson is a regular contributor for Breitbart.com, a speaker, a Tea Party activist, and the host of Sonny's Corner on SiriusXM's Patriot Channel. I'll ask him those questions as well as some questions submitted by you. And if we're lucky, one of them might even know, how the heck are we going to get along? Thank you guys so much for being with us tonight. Today, I never know if I'm supposed to talk about it. We record this on Wednesday nights. I'm not sure if people know that already. I imagine they figured it out because I always say tonight, but comes out on Thursdays. But we're all snuggled up in here with a nice evening thunderstorm in North Carolina. And we got Sonny Johnson, John Orloff, and Ida Rodriguez with us for this week's episode. Hello to everybody. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for having us. Thanks for being back, Ida. I'm a friend of the Politicon podcast, and everyone else, new family members also. It's been a news heavy week. I feel like it kind of sounds stupid to say it's a news heavy week every week because it seems like every week is one. But this Russia story has probably been the biggest one of the week. Would you say that's probably the biggest news story of the week? Anyone want to disagree with that? I think it's probably the big one. And I gotta say, I want to get an understanding from y'all as to how much we should be concerned about this entire story about Russia putting bounties on U.S. service members' heads to get Taliban fighters to kill U.S. service members in Afghanistan. The president's response or some people say lack of response to it. Is this, Sonny, I want to ask you, we'll start with you. Is this something we need to be concerned about? How worried are you? Well, anything that comes out of Russia, we have to make sure we keep an eye on because they are one of the biggest geopolitical foes that we have. And so we are at the moment looking, most eyes are on China. And when Russia has the ability to move without inspection, they tend to do things that will undermine and undercut what we're trying to do in America. So whenever you hear anything coming out of Russia, we need to be very, very wary about understanding who they are, what they want, as far as to eclipse us as being the biggest force and dominating force that they have in Europe right now.
and allow their influence to continue to spread. And I think so a lot of the things that they are doing with their energy industries and a lot of the things that they're doing with inside their own borders should give us a lot of concern as well as they lock down more and more on their own people. So it's a lot of things coming out of Russia that we can be looking at
killing
right
troops.
now.
But killing U.S. troops, that's a pretty big deal, would you not say?
But that's when you hear that and it's always the thing that you hear is one hand, but you need to be watching what they're doing with the other hand. And that's what I mean. You're going to get a bigger impact over their new energy deals than you're going to get out of this story. And it's more important for us if we're going to be looking at the safety of Europe going forward, because I don't think that they are a direct threat to the American homeland. But if we're going to be looking at the security of Europe going forward, that is something we need to be taking a real serious look at. I am for pulling the troops out of Afghanistan from the get-go. So this wouldn't even be something we had to discuss or worry about if we just bring our troops home. And I am for that. In fact, I think we've been there too long. We've spent too much blood and treasure, and it's time for our people to come home.
Ida, you want to jump in here?
Sorry.
Go for it, John. You jump in.
How about Germany? Should we be pulling troops out of Germany like we are doing?
We have with Germany, we have deals with Germany to be there. Germany wants us there. And that is a very big difference between...
But Trump just said we're going to take out 9,000 American troops out of Germany, which kind of upsets the Germans because they're very worried about the Russians.
Then they should have took that money that they were supposed to be invested in their own military and invested in their own military. We are not here to hold their hands through protection of their own borders and their own country.
Whoa, folks! Hold on now. Let me restate the title of the show here before you all get carried away. We usually go at least 15 minutes before someone starts fighting with each other. I want to focus. I'm going to bring it to Ida because I will say, Sonny, I really want to double down on this specific issue with Russia putting bounties on the heads of U.S. service members. And I'm not going to discount what you said about Russia being a threat in lots of areas, certainly. But what's been in the news this week has been this particular story. And Ida, I'd love to hear you weigh in on how concerned you are about that, or if you think it's overblown, that this is something that countries do all the time. What's your take on this story in general that's kind of taken over the media right now?
Well, I mean, with respect to, I agree with Sonny. I think that it is important for us to pay attention to what Russia is doing. And of course, a lot of us call ourselves, patriots. And when you see these situations with the soldier that they just found, whose body they just found in Fort Hood, or the soldiers who end up being casualties abroad for the corruption of governments and all of this stuff. Of course, if we are to call ourselves patriots, we should be alarmed about the fact that we are losing lives at the hands of, a government that we know does not care about the well-being of this country and would love to see us under their thumb as well. But, I think that we always, I'm not a Donald Trump fan nor supporter, but we always scapegoat with Donald Trump, and we don't hold other people accountable, like the people in the military and the people in government who are also part of decisions that are being made on behalf of the United States. And we take into account that Donald Trump is aware of all of this stuff that's happening when he said he doesn't read everything. He doesn't. So he's not up on everything that's going on. Of course, I think we should care about that. My uncle served in the military for 30 years, and he was on at several tours, and he was out in active combat. Do you think, how I would feel that he would be a casualty to his own government, who he, pledged his life to go out and fight on the behalf of the freedom of the American people? So, yeah, I think it's a big deal. And I think it's one of the many things that Putin and his corrupt government that we enable and we're complicit with at times, that they continue to do to undermine our democracy.
John, any thoughts on this Afghanistan story specifically?
Yeah. I mean, I have a little bit of a different take. I think it's an incredibly big effing deal. And I think that this is something to completely blame on Trump and his inaction and to call him out on it. It is unprecedented that we would be in this situation without an actual reaction, a formal reaction. And in terms of responsibility, I would argue that this is the kind of thing that there really is only responsibility at the extreme top. I would argue that nobody on a lower level than cabinet level could make any decision. Right. Yeah. Okay. Could make any decision about this kind of issue about, Putin personally dealing with this,
Yeah. But I mean, some people would say, John, that facts would say that countries have done this type of thing that Russia is doing and have been doing it for decades. We did it arguably in Afghanistan ourselves when we tried to, back in the 80s when the Mujahideen was in power, and we were trying to get rid of that situation as they were breaking
of the
off.
Russians.
So we've done it ourselves. Other countries have done it to our troops. Iran, maybe more than we actually know about. So is it the action of Russia that you're more concerned about, and what they have done, or is it the action or the lack of action from the administration that bothers you more?
Yeah, it's exactly the latter. You're right. This is a way that war is fought, whether it's a Cold War or a hot war, and mercenaries and paying people and intermediaries is a way of doing warfare. The question then becomes, well, what do you do about it when you are the target of it? And in this case, the answer has been nothing. And that seems to be kind of reprehensible in my personal opinion.
Okay, what should be done then? I mean, if unverified news report says that this is happening, what exactly should be done? Like, should we start? What exactly should we be doing at this point?
You can
an unverified report.
Well, I mean, let's take the unverified part out because it's all hypothetical anyway. So if we're going to have a hypothetical question, then we're going to assume
hypothetical question.
Well, hypothetically, let me finish what I'm saying. If we're going to have a hypothetical question, let's just go ahead and say, what should we do if Russia is putting bounties on the heads of U.S. service members? And I want to ask you, Sonny, first. Are you saying that you don't think that anything should be done?
First and foremost, again, I would say our troops shouldn't be there. And then we wouldn't be having this discussion. So I'll start off by first and foremost saying that. And again,
but they're there and they're U.S. service members, and they are service members who we should support. Yes,
an unverified report, and that cannot be left out because it's
because we're doing a hypothetical, and so hypothetically, if a country puts a bounty. If a country puts a bounty on the head of a U.S. service member, what should we do?
Let him go ahead because he's getting ready to say he doesn't think that is unverified. And that's the reason that I kept saying that it was.
Okay. I'm saying you wanted to have a hypothetical situation. So let's do it. Let's not even include Russia. Let's say it's North Korea because we're doing hypotheticals, right? North Korea, Sonny, has placed bounties on the heads of U.S. service members and told the Taliban North Korea will pay Taliban soldiers who kill U.S. service members. What should we do in that situation? Not Russia. Hypothetically, North Korea's done it. How should we respond?
To me, it really doesn't matter who is doing it. The fact anyone who was to put targets on our troops and actually carry through with the threats should meet the full force of the United States military on the battlefield. So if they are in that area and they think that money is so tempting that they want to try our troops, then I would say if our troops are going to be there, then give them the power to lethally assault anyone that would come after their ability to come home to their family and to their country. I would unleash them in a way that would be so devastating that anyone who thought
who are you unleashing them on
the
in
battlefield,
this hypothetical?
On the battlefield, whoever went to do the attack, I would make it so no one would want that money. That money would seem like it was not worth the risk of even touching it, because the annihilation that comes with it would not be worth the momentary payoff that you were getting in that situation. And again, that is a hypothetical.
Okay, it's a hypothetical, but in your hypothetical, I just want to make sure I understand, because I don't want you to, the whole purpose of this podcast is to try to have a discussion. You don't need to be upset. I'm not coming for you. I just want to understand. I just want to understand, but I want to make sure I'm clear, because it sounds to me like you're saying that in that hypothetical, if North Korea were paying the Taliban to kill U.S. soldiers, you would attack the Taliban and you would do nothing to North Korea.
I would send a message to North Korea, but the first part is the protection of the soldiers, unless it's something else that I'm supposed to be looking at.
What's the message to North Korea? Because I just want to get that part together and understand it.
First and foremost is that we are going to protect our soldiers, and anyone you send into the vicinity of any of our soldiers, this is what they are going to be met with. Now, if you want to go into talking about, are we going to put sanctions on them or like those kind of things, we could talk about, but for the immediate safety of the soldiers on the ground, eliminating the immediate threat would be the most important thing to do. And making sure that anybody that was close enough to be able to assault our soldiers understood full well the total amount of annihilation that would come with it. I would make that Moab that was dropped in Afghanistan look like a small pipe bomb in comparison to what would happen. And if that is not a deterrent, then we would find a harder way to make sure we are enunciating just how serious we are about the protection of our troops.
Okay, so I'm just so I know, I think I got you. I want to go on and let the other two have a say in it, but I just want to make sure I'm clear. In this hypothetical situation, the first attacks would be against the Taliban for taking the money. And not necessarily toward North Korea, which, I got to tell you, girl, that doesn't sound like the plan of somebody who wants to get out of Afghanistan. That sounds like the plan of somebody who wants to stay in Afghanistan.
We wouldn't be in Afghanistan. So you can't say that I would want to stay there if my initial reaction was we shouldn't be there in the first place.
Okay. John, what do you think we're going to keep with this hypothetical for the sake of fairness. What do you think you would do to North Korea? How do you feel like we should respond?
Well, the North Korea is actually a different situation, because you can't do a lot to North Korea because we're already doing everything we can do.
Country A. Right. It doesn't matter who it is. How would you respond?
You would respond with sanctions. They're talking about maybe personally doing sanctions against Putin so that he wouldn't be able to fly in international flights. I mean, there's all sorts of things you can do, including like-minded retaliation where we start putting hits on their guys. I mean, there's all sorts of things that go the gamut from just money to really nasty, dirty stuff.
Ida, do you think that this is the type of issue that will affect the president in his re-election chances in November any at all? Do you think this is something that carries more weight, or do you think that it is not really going to register simply because it's one of many other things people are upset about?
Well, I mean, I think it depends on who you're talking about, right? And first of all, John, I wasn't saying that Donald Trump should not be held accountable. What I was saying was that it's strictly, the focus is always on him. And there are a lot of people in Washington who are complicit in what is happening right now. And,
absolutely, yeah.
And I want to say that, I'm not speaking about Republicans only. I'm talking about all of the people who are in Washington taking big checks and are really enjoying the oppression of the working man in America. So when we talk about this hypothetical situation affecting Donald Trump, when it comes to his base, no, because his base is going to follow him blindly wherever, because they have dedicated themselves to his agenda, and his agenda is what his agenda is. And that's up for interpretation for whoever you're asking. For me, it is a very specific agenda that affects people of color, and it affects us in a very specific way, which is what you see in what's happening in this country. And that, to me, does not have anything to do with him being a Republican, and that's what the Republicans are doing to people. That has been a systemic issue that America has had for hundreds of years, and it is across the aisle, people taking checks, and they're benefiting from the oppression of the working man and the everyday man, specifically when you're talking about people of color. Is it going to affect him with other people who consider themselves patriots and are not Donald Trump supporters? If they verify these alleged, charges or accusations or whatever it is, yeah, it's going to affect him. But I think that, we're on fire right now. There is just stuff happening you pick and choose. Every day it's a brand new headline. The media has become a clown show. Everybody's getting checks from everywhere. Everybody is negotiating everything. How do we have a normal election in America? I don't know how we do that anymore.
Sonny, there are several Republicans in Congress who've been a little bit concerned about some of the things that have happened this week. Does it concern you that maybe the president is starting to see some cracks in his support amongst Republicans?
Those cracks have always existed, and it's necessary to have those cracks, because if not, think about how many other places in the world we would be right now if we left it up to some of these Republicans to set the agenda as far as us being the policemen of the world. I think that there's a very heavy strain within the Republican Party of people who don't mind borrowing money to send our troops into war zones, and to have people that are standing up against them and saying it's time to stop that, I think is one of the best things to happen to the Republican Party, because
in fairness, though, he's not just seeing those cracks with regard to Russia. I mean, he's starting to see a few cracks when it comes to the masks. When it comes to masks and coronavirus, we had Senator Lamar Alexander specifically asked the president to wear a mask. This week. We've seen Mitch McConnell starting to wear masks. We've seen Fox and Friends and people on Fox, Sean Hannity, saying that the president should probably wear a mask and set an example. Is it concerning to you that maybe some people on the conservative side may be starting to point out, even if they don't agree, point out some of the places that the president should change?
I'm sorry. I am very, very critical of the Republican Party. So no, it does not it worry me. I'm happy about it. There needs to be reformation in the Republican Party. There needs
even
to be
amongst Mitch McConnell.
Yes, I'm not a Mitch McConnell fan, and it is time that new and fresh ideas are brought into the Republican Party, point blank and period. And the way that they are operating right now, and the fact that they are finally getting opposition instead of just spineless jellyfish who lay down whenever those higher above them tell them to, is refreshing to me. It's not worrisome to me at all, because I think that the direction that the Republican Party is going in, if they continue in this direction, they're going to annihilate themselves as a party. And I don't know if we are in place right now to have anything to actually take that place of a second party, and that kind of division. What that will look like, I really don't know. But I am up for that, as opposed to keeping the status quo of the Republican Party as it stands under the leadership of people like Mitch McConnell.
But if that's the case, John, I would imagine if the Republicans start to peel away, that totally kills the president's chances of winning re-election even further. Am I wrong?
No, I totally agree with you. I think he's in huge trouble. I think the whole Republican Party is in trouble at the moment. And I think it's going to get a lot worse with COVID's numbers getting worse. I think that's really going to be, at the end of the day, in November. Yeah, we're going to be talking about Russia and Mueller and Russiagate and all that stuff. But really what people are going to be grappling with is how many people do they know have died. And I think that's why he's going to lose. I think that reality, unless a lot of tampering and suppression, voter suppression happens, and I totally think that's possible. And that's why I would urge that we need very large margins in November to battle the arguments that are going to come probably starting election night.
That's a concern for you? You think tampering? You think voter
suppression,
fraud, but voter suppression, maybe voter fraud. Do you think mail-in voting is a good idea or a bad idea?
Of course,
Does it open up the door?
Of course, I do. Are there people who really don't think it's a good idea, Clay?
I don't know if they do not think it's a good idea or they just say they think it's not a good idea. I never can tell. But but I think Sonny, how do you feel about mail-in voting?
I don't think that there should be mail-in voting, except for the instances of people who cannot get out to vote. And I understand that there are people that fit that circumstance, and special waivers should be given to them. But a part of our responsibility as American citizens is to participate in the process. And that includes getting up, getting out, and being a part of the process.
Ida, what is your thought on access to voting? Do you think mail-in voting should be universal around the country? Do you think some people have talked about the need to take the voting process out of the hands of states and put it at the federal level and make federal elections governed by one particular body so that we don't have 20,000 different voting election boards in all the different counties and states in the country? I mean, which way do you think is safer? Is there a way to improve it?
The funny thing is that it's the government that is regulating the government on what the government should do. So the people who are saying we should take it out of the hands of the states and put it at the federal level is just funny to me, because as John stated, the corruption is the corruption, and where it exists on all levels. I do think in a pandemic that people should be able to mail in their vote, specifically when the people who are being affected the most by the pandemic are those who are in those areas that people don't tend to care about. And I think that we have to reform our whole voting, the whole voting process, the electoral college, all of that. It's built into a systemic issue that we have to oppress people that has been in place for a very long time.
Here.
And I don't understand why this is going to, people think that the government and the system that has been failing a lot of people for such a long time is going to change with one election. The whole thing needs a wash. So, I mean, I think that whether it's federal or state, if we have corrupt politicians, again, I don't bang for any political party like I'm a Red Sox or Yankee fan. I am of the belief that they are both trash and they have failed the people, and there's so much corruption and it's rotting from the inside out that we need.
So you're an optimist, is what you're saying?
Absolutely.
I do have a question about voting. Sonny, do you think that election day should be a holiday?
I would have no problem if that's what we decided to do as a country. I wouldn't see that as a problem at all. Nor would I see a problem of opening up and having early voting a couple of days before the election and opening access to that way, so you can so that you can shrink the number of people that are there at one time during a pandemic. I think that there are ways that we can figure out how to do this. And I also think it's beneficial that we figure out how to do this. Because if we look at the record, every president after this point is probably going to have to deal with some kind of pandemic, because we are a globalist, because we are a global world now. And because of travel, because of how easily everything is spread, and just by the record alone, this is something we are going to face again in the future. So I think that what we need to start doing now is, if I take into what Aida said, and while we're reforming or trying to remove some of the corrupted areas, we should also be looking at designing it for the next century and what that looks like, especially with things like globalism and pandemics and just the things that we know are we're going to have to deal with coming up in the future. So this gives us the perfect opportunity to, yes, remake the way that we look at our voting system, but also to make sure that we are preparing for things to happen in the future so that we don't get in this position again where we're trying to figure it out. This is a very good chance to do a good case study, figure out what's wrong, figure out what's right, and make sure that if this happens again in the process of going through an election cycle, we as American citizens have our right to vote protected. And not just protected in the ballot booth, but protected overall by the structure.
I'm going to give you an award before the end of this show. I just believe you deserve it. You are very good at changing the subject, because I'm trying to follow you, girl, and it is tough.
And how exactly did I change the subject?
Well, no, because maybe you didn't change the subject, but you said something, and I thought, oh my gosh, I want to ask you a question about that. And then we ended up with a constitutional referendum by the end of it, practically. I want to go talk about your voting thing.
No. I say nothing about it.
I know you didn't.
I don't want these politicians touching the Constitution in any way, shape, form, or fashion. I don't trust a single one of them, and I would not give them access to fiddle with the Constitution
in the idea of making sure that we have laws that are appropriate if we are in a situation like this in the future. Because you did mention early voting, you did mention making sure that everyone has their right to vote protected in the voting booth. If early voting is on the table, if other access options are on the table, polling places, polling locations to try to minimize the number of people who are at polling locations, would you increase the number of polling places to make access more readily available to people who are trying to do their constitutional duty, their American patriotic duty to vote? Do you think increasing would be a good way to help in a pandemic like this?
Yes, and if I could say, what I would say is, instead of looking at if we could take elections and move them up to from state to federal, I would be looking in the other direction and looking at the citizens within certain communities and actually letting them see what is the best, because these people are the people that know the easiest.
Well, that's what a lot of them do, and I think a lot of them do that. But states tend to determine.
Exactly, and that's the point. Their voices.
States tend to determine certain things. For example, and I want to come back to exactly what you were talking about, because you did say we're going to come back to exactly what you were talking about, because you said that you thought that increasing polling places would be a good idea in a pandemic. Kentucky, just last week, when they had their primary election, actually decreased the number of polling stations. They went from 3,700 polling locations in 2018 down to 170 polling locations. So I'm assuming in a pandemic, that would be the wrong thing to do, right?
Not even in a pandemic, in any circumstance, that would be the wrong thing to do. That is not a constructive way to run American elections. And I understand that people think
Okay, so that's something I imagine you agree with her on, John, yeah?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
What's up? I am Machine Gun Kelly, and look, I know Halloween is going to suck this year because there's no trick-or-treating and all that, but I've got a treat. There's a musical podcast that I made with my friends 24K Golden, Ian Dior, and Dana Dentata, and Satan. Well, Satan's not my friend, but Tommy Lee is, and Tommy Lee is playing Satan. But don't just take it from me. Tell him, Satan.
Thanks, dude. It feels great to be playing Satan on this podcast. This Halloween, listen to Halloween in Hell on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or whatever you get your podcasts on. Soundtracks available on Spotify or wherever you stream your music. But I mean, everybody's got a podcast these days. But what would I know? I'm Satan, for God's sakes. Don't even get me started.
After you listen to today's podcast, here's one to add to your playlist. I'm Christian O'Connell, and I've had this thought for a while. What if you took the world's funniest and most interesting people and asked them to share the stories behind their 3 most treasured items?
When you said the idea, I thought that's a really good idea.
No doubt about it, the guitar. I think I know the same chords now as I did when I was 14. You know what I mean?
From iHeartRadio, this is The Stuff of Legends. Add it to your playlist for free. Just search for Stuff of Legends in your podcast app.
But I would still wonder, I haven't quite heard why you don't like mail-in voting and why you think that's a bad idea, even though we've done it for years and years and years. During World War II, in 1944, so many people, all the soldiers voted by mail. I mean, it's not, are you worried about safety?
Have you ever voted by mail, John?
Soldiers voting by mail is different, and allotting them that ability to vote by mail, I'm fine with. Allotting nursing homes to vote by mail, I'm fine with. Allotting any kind of retirement areas that cities might specifically say, instead of pulling people out of these areas, how about we put a polling place in that area so that they don't have to travel out and take that risk? These are all things that we can start to do, put into place, and design that actually serves the benefit of the citizen and protects their rights to vote, but also says you actually have to get up and participate in this process. That
Can I
part
just
of
ask
it cannot be left out.
I'm sorry, Clay, but I'm just still curious. Why is it bad for other people to vote by mail? Non-soldiers, non-old people.
Because
What's wrong
we
with it?
should get up and participate in the process. That is why. If you want to look at issues of...
Have you ever voted by mail before, Sonny?
No,
have you ever done an absentee ballot?
I get up, me and my husband, we go together, and we take our daughter with us because it is an important part of what we do as Americans. And we cannot continue to just sit and say we have all of these corrupted politicians and we have all of these corrupted systems and we have all these metrics of oppression and then mail in our freaking vote. That's half of the problem with as apathetic as we become as American citizens, that we do not understand how important that we are to this process and that we are in it and making sure it works for our benefit, as opposed to just making it as easy as possible. We need to understand that our weight in this game is worth more than just mailing it in. And until we get a population that has that kind of intense focus on what is happening in the political sphere of this country, then we're going to continue to have the corruption that we see and are complaining about now.
So 64% of people support mail-in voting. So if you're going to construct a voting system that looks the way the people want it, as you're saying, as it that works for the people, then wouldn't it stand to reason that if 64% of Americans say that they want mail-in voting, that's the system that we should have if we're building one that works for the people?
No, because the system we have gives localities and states the ability to vote for that. So we do have states like Washington that do mail-in voting. I'm not saying burn their system to the ground. If that's what they've chosen.
No, but you said you wanted wanted a system that worked for the people, and the people have said in polls that they want mail-in voting.
We don't have a national system where national people get to vote for everything across the nation. We have a system specifically set up to let localities decide that and states to decide that. So like I said, if Washington decides it wants to have mail-in ballots, I am not suggesting we go in and burn down their system and implement mine. That is fine for them if that is what they chose. If you're giving me the choice of what I am going to vote for and what I am going to support, then my answer is going to be no. And I am going to try my best to fight for systems that work in that direction.
So you would say a system that allowed you to go and vote in person is what you would want to do. And perhaps, Ida, if you wanted to vote by mail, you would be able to do that. Would that work, Ida, for you?
Well, the thing is that the reason a lot of people don't go out and can't afford to vote is because they have jobs where they're not making a living wage and they cannot afford to go stand in a line for 5 hours. There are a lot of reasons why people mail in the vote. Now, one of the things that I hear and with Sonny and I, as a person of color, my grandmother came here in the 50s and was she was dropped right off into the civil rights movement. She would always tell us it was important for us to go vote because we were voting for our ancestors because they were not able to vote, and it meant something to us, and it means something to us. But in terms of me regulating, the country, we have so many imbalances in our system right now. And what you saw in Kentucky, was a great disservice to the people of Kentucky, all of them who were banking on those doors, trying to get in so that they could vote. And it was by design. And that's what all of this stuff has been. It's been by design for centuries, for decades. And we can go back and count, it's no accident that was happening, and the pandemic is being used as a tool to enable a lot of the oppressive tools that the American government utilizes against its people. But I have mailed in my vote because I work where I have to travel all the time and I'm not in town, and I have to mail in my vote because it is important for me to render my vote. There are some people who have autoimmune diseases. There are people. I think that when we start thinking about the way America works and how where we are today and what people have to do in order to get to vote, which has become, quite an issue and a conversation, which is why we're having this conversation right now, and you hear it all the time, is because there are so many imbalances in American voting that, it's making the people nervous. It's making the people very nervous because, I don't know if you looked out your window, but what's happening in America today is very, we're constantly being gaslighted and we're constantly looking at the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. The reality of it is that it's all connected to voting because there is a reason why these things have been happening under this administration and the last. And the American people have been dumbed down, and we are getting our information from Twitter. And the truth is that a lot of things haven't changed or improved for people, people of color, poor people, from Obama to Donald Trump. And if we don't start really paying attention to our local government and really understanding what our vote means, because a lot of people say our votes don't mean anything. And I would beg to differ, because if they didn't mean anything, they would not have locked those people out in Kentucky. There wouldn't be.
Well, let's move to a topic where some people would say that maybe a few people did see some things for them improve over the last few weeks. The Supreme Court handed down a few decisions over the past 2 weeks that have surprised, I think, a lot of court watchers because they handed down decisions that upheld DACA. They handed down decisions that said that being LGBT was not something that people could discriminate for in employment. And they upheld or struck down a anti-abortion law in Louisiana just this week. And in each of those cases, Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts sided with the justices who typically vote with the liberal side. And in the LGBT employment case, Supreme Court Justice Gorsuch, who was nominated by Donald Trump, actually sided with John Roberts and the liberals to say that you cannot fire someone for being gay. That's ironic to me a little bit, Sonny, because certainly Supreme Court Neil Gorsuch was somebody who was touted by the president as being a conservative justice in the mold of Antonin Scalia. But his vote and his decision, he actually wrote the decision in that case, was not one that I think most people would say Antonin Scalia would have held. And John Roberts has 3 times in the past 2 weeks voted with the liberals. What does that say to you about the direction of the Supreme Court, Sonny? And with Justice Gorsuch's decision, what does that say to you about President Trump's ability to appoint a Supreme Court justice who will make decisions that satisfy his base?
The Supreme Court justices are not supposed to satisfy a base. They're not supposed to satisfy a political party. So even if I were to say I disagree with what they did, it wouldn't change the fact that that is not why they're there. They're not there to go off of my opinion or my political ideology as to how they see and rule a case. So I think that this shows that you can have objectivity in the Supreme Court, and I think that will be important for all of us going forward, that they are looking at it case by case and not based on an ideological rule. And out of all of that, sometimes we're going to agree with what they come out with, and we're going to disagree with sometimes with what they come out with. But I think that at least goes to show that there is some level of objectivity still left in the Supreme Court, and we as a country should be able to cheer that and realize that if we can have one institution that is not separated down a political line, but actually looking at the function of their job as their primary metric, then I think that is a win for the American people. And that's just
John Roberts moving to the left. John is
no,
Chief Justice
I'm
moving to the left.
Way more cynical than Sonny. Starting with 2000 and the Supreme Court in Gore v. Bush about the apolitical nature of the Supreme Court, which is to say, I don't think there is an apolitical nature that Sonny is talking about. I would argue that I think this is actually possibly a really cynical move by Roberts, because as the Chief Justice, he has a somewhat larger responsibility to not just the court, but the Supreme Court as an institution. And it certainly feels, when you have 5-4 decisions, it's a very, very tricky thing. We're not supposed to have 5-4 decisions, and it's only been in the last 15, 20 years that we're getting so many of these really tight decisions. And because of exactly what Sonny was saying, that people are starting to be cynical like me and think that that's all politics, i.e. Gore v. Bush, and most of the 99% of the Roberts Court's rulings are very political and a loss across political lines, or written across along political lines. So I think these are issues of institutionalism and making sure that the court doesn't have the smell of over politicizing events.
Ida, should we regret, take back, I shouldn't say we, should folks who opposed Gorsuch's nomination give him credit and take back some of the sky is falling rhetoric that they threw at him during his nomination, if he has sided with a pretty groundbreaking landmark decision, especially for gay rights?
No. I don't think anyone should take back anything that they felt and said if they said it from a place of authenticity. I mean, if people are uninformed and they're just going by what is trending on Twitter, then maybe they should do a little more research and know what's going on. I don't think you should give credit to politicians for doing the jobs that they're supposed to be doing. I used to bring home A's to my dad, and he would say, "What do you want? A cookie? That's what you're supposed to be doing. You don't get props for getting an A." I think that the people who feel like the sky is falling feel like the sky is falling for various reasons. I think that when you look at the political landscape of today, it's a mess. I mean, you have you just got politicians behaving in a way that is I mean, we seen this before. We've seen them with the outliers, but now it's become the standard. And I do think that there are political motivations for why people do things in government, and the Supreme Court is not exempt. But their job is to be objective. Their job is to do their job. And I don't know why, we got to take back what we felt about, people who we don't have a history of being politically motivated and driven. So no, I don't think anybody should take anything back, and I think we should stay woke because I do believe that, all of it is all. I mean, it's all connected, and there's so much happening at one time, and we do need to be vigilant of the government, because while we're praising for one thing happening over here, something horrible is happening over there, and it's just too much to keep up with at this time.
Okay, I want to take a few questions from our listeners. They send them in to us at Politicon on Twitter and Instagram. You can send yours in on Twitter or Instagram at Politicon, or you can email them to us at podcasts@politicon.com. And we had a few come in for all three of you, so each of you's got a few this week. Sonny, we'll start with you. Sylvia from Burlington. There's a lot of Burlington, so not sure which state that's from. Sylvia says, Trump said he did not hear the racists in the Villages retweet. How is that possible?
He didn't look at it and he retweeted it like an idiot without listening to it.
That is a quick answer.
That's
okay,
what
there
happened.
You go.
If that's
okay.
how if that's how it happened, that could be the only way it could have happened, right?
Okay. Honest answers. That's what we're here for. Donna from Cedar Rapids. Mitch McConnell is wearing a mask. Is that a message to the Trump campaign?
Of course it is. Of course it is. Yes,
okay.
they know they are in trouble and they've got to fix it and they've got to do it fast.
Ida, David from L.A., right there, maybe he's near you. Is now the time for universal health care?
I feel like always is the time for universal health care, especially during this pandemic where you see so many disparities in the treatment of the people who are coming down with COVID. And it's not just Black and brown people; it's poor white people. Yeah, I mean, I'm a universal health care person all the time. I don't waver from that. I don't think it should be conditional. I think, healthcare should be a right, not a privilege.
Sunny Art from Jacksonville says, if the polls don't pick up soon, will Trump drop out?
No, I don't think he'll drop out. I think he will use every excuse he can to say why the system was against him, as opposed to actually putting together a coherent plan to reach outside of his base to more people.
Okay, I don't usually stop during these, but I'm going to stop and ask you. Both of those last two answers, Sonny, surprised me. I'll wait till we get to the last one for you. But those surprised me from you. John, I'll move on to you for right now. Kenneth from Tampa asks, Biden in the basement seems to be working. How can he fuck it up?
How can he fuck it up? I really think he can't. I mean, I guess if he went out and I think this election is such a referendum on Trump, and Trump is such a unique, historically awful candidate, figure, and incumbent and human being that I really think, I don't think there's anything he could do.
Okay,
he can talk. That's what he can do. If he goes out there and starts talking.
Okay, yep. Ida, that leads me right to the next question for you. Jason, who sent us a message via Twitter, asks, what's your favorite thing about Joe Biden?
My favorite thing about Joe Biden is those memes that they had when Obama was president, and it was him saying things that were inappropriate. That's my favorite thing about Joe Biden. I think that him being quiet has been effective in the truth that Donald Trump isn't quiet. But I'm very afraid of Joe Biden's mouth, because Joe Biden, the proof is in the pudding. You can pull up reels of things that he said that have been offensive and inappropriate and just wrong. But my favorite thing about him is, I don't know.
You gave us the memes. That works. Are you going to vote for him?
Am I going to vote for him? Yes. I have no choice at this point.
Okay.
Sonny,
Javier from New York City. When will the Europeans allow Americans to travel there again?
As soon as they realize how devastating it is for their economy to keep travel out. And once they realize that, you're going to see a new standard. But I think that they are kind of wagging their finger back in Donald Trump's face for all the criticisms that he has put over them over the last 4 years. And this is kind of their only way to be like, nah, 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 nah. And they're taking advantage of it. But for a region that kind of does rely on the economics of travel, they won't be able to sustain it for long.
Okay. John, Teresa from San Francisco asks, is it time for a constitutional convention?
Yes, but I don't think we
only
should
your
have
side
one.
gets to make the rules.
You're right. Well, I don't. I mean, yes, we do need a rethinking structurally of some things. Ida has brought up some excellent points, as has Sunny, on basic structural problems that we have, some of which would have to be requiring a constitutional convention, i.e. the Electoral College, for example. The Electoral College is really an awful thing and has only failed us, in my opinion, every time the Electoral College has trumped the popular position, as it were. I would say the population was right in 2000. I would say the population was right in 2016. they made the right choice. But the system is rigged, and we got what we got. So, but in practice, it would be such a disaster that I think it would do more harm than good.
The Constitutional Convention, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Ida, Nora from Orlando, the mainstream media model encourages outrage. Is it encouraging extremism?
Absolutely. I think that when you think about, first of all, when you think about mainstream media and you talk about people who are actually having conversations on air about politics who never went to school for journalism and are not actual journalists, and they have reality shows that we think are news programs, absolutely. It is feeding extremism. Again, I am not talking about a specific political party. I'm talking about across the board.
You think both sides
Oh
have
yeah,
those
we
networks?
can't even have conversations anymore. Like people who are conservative versus people who are liberal. When you think about the conversations, and I'm a liberal, so I am, and I'm a liberal with some conservative values, which you can't say anymore because now being a centric is a bad word. Being a centrist is a bad word. Being somebody, you can't even claim your political affiliation without offending somebody else. Absolutely. Do I think they're feeding it? They feed it every day. And unfortunately, for people who get most of their information from these news programs, which they don't realize are, personalities who are selling books. I'm a stand-up comedian, so I work in New York where I'll see, Ann Coulter and Bill Maher are friends. And you see people having fights about the things that Ann Coulter and Bill Maher said. And they don't realize that they're both rich people who enjoy a different type of life than the working class person in this country. And they fall for that stuff all the time. So do I think they are feeding extremism? And yes, I think it's unfortunate that you have to go to several outlets so that you can find the mean story of what's happening, because everywhere you go, it has a spin.
Sonny, you talked about your prediction. I guess if it's in a prediction, because you didn't think that president would drop out of the race if his polling didn't pick up. But you did say that you thought he would make excuses to say how it was rigged against him or blame. Do you think that that's a form of extremism? How do you feel like extremism plays into our daily life more or less than it used to? And is it a real problem, do you think?
I agree. I agree with what Ida said about how in the mainstream you see the outskirts being a lot louder than the people in the middle and the more centric voices. So you're not allowed to have decent conversations where you might disagree with people, but you're able to walk away in a respectful manner. And I think that they are trying to kill that ability for us as American citizens just to converse with each other. And I think that we need to make sure that we are protecting us. And I appreciate you having me on the show today because it kind of exhibits everything that's wrapped up into that. But when you talk about Trump, I don't think that that's extremism. I just think that that's ego. And to have him to have to excuse away his ego or his loss of ego is going to be the biggest motivator of that, as opposed to anything radical or ideological or politically related. I think that he has shown more than anything that is the most important thing to him. And I think that is what he'll be guarding the most.
So, but that sort of riling up the base from him, do you think that contributes to extremism, or do you just think it's a byproduct of it?
No, I think that the extremism is pushed by the failure of government to look at the needs of the American citizens and actually meet them. And as long as you are not meeting the needs of the American citizens, you're going to get extremists. You're going to get people on the fringes that say that they have solutions, and their solutions are going to push us further in whatever direction you want to look. You know what I'm saying? Right or left, because you have them on both. And that is what happens when you are not addressing the problems of the American people. And like I just said earlier, that involves understanding how local government works, making sure you know who is on your local ballot, making sure you understand how that government functions at its lowest and most basic form. And they have, like she said, dumbed down our civics so much that we don't even look at the power that we have in the government that is closest to us. And I think that that's where all of these problems are going to be solved if they are going to be solved. And if they are not solved and if they are not addressed through local level politics, then you're going to hear the fringes get louder and louder, and they are going to start to overpower more and more of the people in the middle.
Yeah, John, I mean, I think Sonny's certainly got a point that when people are frustrated with their government not doing what they feel needs to be done, they get angry. But how is it possible for the government to know what to do if the sounds are both coming only from the far left and only from the far right? Aren't they going to always make half the people unhappy?
Who, when you say they, the government?
Politicians, our government.
It's not their responsibility to manage social media and MSNBC and Fox. I don't think it's their responsibility, unless, I mean, we had laws at one time.
Isn't MSNBC's responsibility to get better ratings?
Well, we had laws. I'm probably the oldest person on at the moment, and we had laws of fair practices, and both sides got equal time, and there were all these things that were broken, that were made right after Watergate, and then were all broken in Clinton and Bush years, and not broken, but the laws relapsed or taken away, and so suddenly it's the Wild West, and anybody can do what they want. I think the solutions were literally what Ida and Sonny both really said so perfectly. I mean, I don't have anything to add to what they said about the solutions. But I think the problem is severe, and it's not going to be resolved easily.
Well, we'll leave it on that note of positivity right there. John, you have a new ad that you have put out, and you've got a movie coming out pretty soon.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
No,
yes.
I do worry about it. I'm interested.
Yes, we had an ad from the Lincoln Project drop a couple days ago, and then I'm working on a mini series for Apple Plus, and
does it
Tom
have a title?
Hanks.
Can we look for it?
It's called Masters of the Air, but we are not. COVID has sort of slowed the production for a moment, so it's not quite finished.
Well, I imagine that is going to be a hot second till everybody gets back to work in production, but we will be looking for Masters of the Air when it comes out. You can also see Band of Brothers is on HBO Max right now. If you want to go back and see some of John's Emmy-nominated work, you can do that there. Ida, where can we see you? Your show's on Netflix. Your show with Tiffany Haddish is on Netflix, streaming right now. If people haven't seen it, they can see that. Where else can we see you?
Fridays, I have a visual podcast on that I stream live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. It's called Truth Serum, where we talk about
Truth Serum. Nice.
Yeah, we talk about social and political issues from the perspective of people of color, because when you watch Fox News or CNN, you always have the puppets that belong to, the establishment, and you don't get to see the people who actually, have varied point of views about different issues, social and political alike. So, and we like to bring humor to it. So it's on Fridays at 12 p.m. Pacific time. And I'm working on my new special for HBO Max, which will be coming out next year, and my scripted series with HBO Max. So those are the things I'm working on. And you can find me on social media at Funny AIDA, on Twitter and Instagram. And then on Facebook, it's Ida, AIDA.Rodriguez. And I don't fight with people on social media.
There you go. You're in the minority there, I think, because that's what most people use Twitter for. No. Sonny, I got to tell you, if you also have a show on HBO Max, I'm quitting, because I'll be the only one who doesn't. At that point, where can we see you?
I have a show on Sirius XM Patriot every single Saturday, 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern. It's called Sonny's Corner. We look at Black conservatism. It is a Black conservative-centric show, and it's probably one of the only ones on the right that effectively actually talks about Black conservatism as opposed to like the lily white version that's put in mainstream America.
And you've got a podcast still, or is you still doing the Did She Say That podcast?
No, it will be coming back, but we took a bit of a hiatus from it to get some other things straight. We're going to be announcing soon.
Nice. Sirius XM Patriot, channel 125 on Saturdays at 1. And I'll just be sitting right here in Raleigh, and I'll be back here next week with another episode. Please, if you are listening, they tell me you guys are better at podcasts. You've done these. They tell me that you're supposed to ask people to like and rate and review. I guess they'll give me a sandwich if we get good reviews, maybe. So like, subscribe, rate, and review. How the heck are we going to get along? Come back here next Thursday for a special episode we have coming up next week. We'll hopefully be announcing a little bit more about that later on in the week for you. But I just want to make sure I say a big thank you to Sunny, to Ida, and to John for being with us tonight. We'll make sure that all their social media links are included with this episode. Thank you guys so much for being here. It's always nice to have a conversation with opposing viewpoints where people listen, and I appreciate the three of you for doing that. And we'll be back next week with How the Heck Are We Gonna Get Along?
On September 17th, 2009, 24-year-old Mitrice Richardson disappeared without a trace in the woods near Malibu, California, and was never seen alive again. I'm Katherine Townsend, host of the podcast Hell and Gone. We're going to try to find out what really happened to Mitrice Richardson. School of Humans and iHeartRadio present Hell and Gone Season 3. Listen to Hell and Gone on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
After you listen to today's podcast, here's one to add to your playlist. I'm Christian O'Connell, and I've had this thought for a while. What if you took the world's funniest and most interesting people...
Hello, I'm Ricky Gervais.
Celeste Barber. Some people call me Beyonce.
I'm Russell Brand.
...and asked them to share the stories behind their 3 most treasured items?
No doubt about it, the guitar. I think I know the same chords now as I did when I was 14.
From iHeartRadio, this is The Stuff of Legends. Add it to your playlist for free. Just search for Stuff of Legends in your podcast app.